Welcome to episode 26 of the Single Man Podcast and to our halfway point of the podcast. I'd be lying if there hasn't been a lot of temptation. I feel like the enemy has really come after me in different ways doing this podcast. You know, temptation to, okay, you're single, like you're going to be single forever, Carlton. Like you should be going on dates, like maybe you should be asking people out more and just trying to stay confident and content. And I'm open to dating. I'm open to going on dates, and I want to meet my future wife, and I believe I will do that in God's timing. But until that comes, just being aware of what God's called me to do in the season and doing that to the best of my ability, and not focusing on when's she gonna come or okay, I'm getting impatient, God, like what's going on? Come on. I, to be honest, wanted to quit.
Challenge yourself constantly. You have to be a little bit patient.
I felt like I was in a hole looking up.
The whole idea is you have to become content in singleness.
I'd be lying if I said I haven't fired off some Instagram DMs.
The word dating is not mentioned in the Bible.
I dedicated my life at Tomorrow World to Jesus.
Welcome to the Single Man Podcast, where we delve into candid conversations with Christian men about their journey to faith, advice for their younger selves, and navigating dating. With a heart to reach men from all walks of life, dive into real stories of redemption, growth, and the hope found in following Jesus. I'm your host, Carlton French, a 29-year-old single Christian, and I'm excited for you to listen to this week's episode. Let's jump into it. Hey everybody, it's Carlton French. Welcome to episode 26 of the Single Man Podcast and to our halfway point of the podcast. I am here today by myself for a solo episode, and I'm excited to be able to jump into just updating everybody on how things have been going with the podcast, how we made it to 26, the halfway point of the podcast. If you haven't been tracking along from the beginning, update, I am planning to only do 52 total episodes of the podcast, and so 26 is halfway within 52, and so I'm hopping on again today for the first time since I was on episode 1 by myself talking about my vision for the podcast, and since episode 3 where I talked about my testimony of the podcast, and just felt led to hop on and give an update as to where things are at with the podcast, how the first half of it has gone, what some highlights have been, share some updates as to some enhancements I'm making to the podcast, as well as some personal stories of listeners who have reached out and shared feedback and shared their personal experiences and lessons that they've learned from listening to the podcast. And I'm also going to be doing a little bit of Q&A this episode. I had on the Instagram for the Single Man Podcast Q&A where people could write in and ask questions to me. And so I'm excited to answer some questions on this episode as well. And then I'm going to wrap things up with what's ahead for the podcast, what the next few episodes will be like. And I'm really excited about an upcoming series that I have planned. And I think it's going to be really encouraging both to single men as well as to single women who listen to the podcast. And so, yeah, I'm excited to just break down kind of where everything's at with you today. I hope you're having a great Friday if you're listening on Friday and part of the Friday at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific squad. And if you're listening on a different time, a different day, I hope you're doing well as well. So thanks so much for taking the time to spend time with me and with my guests over the last 6 months or so now. I guess, March 2024 is when the podcast launched. And yeah, it's wild to think we're now at the halfway point. If you're not watching on YouTube or Spotify, I even broke out the original outfit for the podcast logo and the outfit I wore for episode 1 and 3 today. So yeah, if you're not watching, you can check that out as well. But back in the red and black pullover today. So I have my phone here with me, and I have some points that I specifically want to touch on, as well as be able to read the Q&A and the personal stories for people that have tuned in. So that's why I have my phone out if you are watching and see me with my phone. But yeah, I just really want to start off expressing my gratitude for everybody who's been tuning in and listening. It's really amazing to think that, when I started the podcast, felt like God gave me the vision for it last October, that if this could help one person, then it was worth it. And to see where it's at now, where we have on average 400 listeners to each episode, and our highest episode has had over 1,200 viewers on it, which has just been incredible and something that I really couldn't expect, and don't know why so many people would want to listen. But I do think that there is something unique about the podcast, and something that I believe is why God's called me to create it, is to bring to light stories of men and how they're navigating faith and dating, and that there are single men that exist that are trying to follow Jesus and trying to date in a way that honors God. And so, I've been encouraged to see how the podcast has continued to grow and to impact people's lives. I am really something that's stuck out to me, something that we've been able to do, is we had a live in-person podcast recording. This was back in August, and that was something that I was able to partner with some of my friends from this ministry called Single Minded at Passion City Church, and my friend Tim Vestudo, who was on the podcast. He helps lead that, and we had a live in-person event back at the end of August with Hamilton Winters and his wife, Alex Winters. Hamilton was on episode 6. If you haven't seen that one, I would highly recommend that episode. But we were able to have an in-person audience for an episode where we didn't record it, so that's why it hasn't come out on the podcast. But basically, I had them, talk about their story, how they met, how they dated, how it's been being married. And it was really encouraging to do that in front of a live audience. We had 85 people come in person, and people came that I had never met before, people that had just been listening to the podcast and saw that I was doing this live event on Instagram. And so that was really encouraging, just to see how there's real people that have been impacted by the podcast. And I really enjoyed being able to sit down with Hamilton and Alex and just talk about their story and encourage single men and women that are out there. So that's been my biggest takeaway from, making it to the halfway point here, is that there are a lack of stories of single men out there in the world. And it's been something that I've been honored to play a small part in, is bringing some of them to light. And so for everybody who's come on the podcast to this point, just really grateful that you would trust me to steward your story well. It's something that is a weight that I feel and that I try to carry well, is just every week there's a guy coming on who in most cases has never spoken in a public type of forum, who has never shared their story to where anybody could hear it. There's fear at times, there's anxiety, there's lies from the enemy that creep in. And so one thing that I do with every guest before we start recording, which I haven't shared this on the podcast before, but we pray before every episode. And then I also pray with the guests the Thursday before their episode comes out. And it's something that I just have felt led to do, and just want the whole podcast to be something that God is behind and God is supporting and God is causing the increase. And it's nothing that I'm doing. I just get to steward this opportunity. And so wanted to start off today's update, episode 26, halfway point, with just that and where things are at. Also want to give an update just on me personally, where I'm at. It's been hard, I would say, doing this podcast and having this be something that every week I'm working to do and working hard to put out quality content and make the podcast something that is something that you would be interested in listening to and find engaging. And I have a high standard for what I know that it can be. And so I probably work too hard at it at times. Just like every time stamp on YouTube, on Spotify. Every word in a episode description, the titles for every episode, the thumbnails, the reels that we post on social media, and when I say we, really, it's just me. I do everything for the podcast. So yeah, that's something that I feel like I'm getting more comfortable talking about. When I first started the podcast, I was not wanting to say that I was really the one behind it, and just have it be more anonymous. But I feel like creating more vulnerability in how it's been going for me as the person behind it can just help you as the listener understand how much work goes into it, and that I just really care about it and believe it's helping people. And so I think you'll see that from some of the personal stories that I'll share here as well. So before we get into the personal stories, as well as the Q&A portion of the episode and answering some of your questions that you sent in, want to also highlight just some announcements for the podcast and some enhancements that I'm making to it here for the second half of the podcast. And so I'm going to be, I've created a singular link for the podcast where you can click here. If you're watching the episode, you can screenshot it and then go into your photos and hold down onto the QR code. So you can pull up this QR code, or you can take a picture of it if you're watching, or you can check the link in the description. But going forward, instead of having like a bunch of different links for every different platform that the podcast is on, and the links to the Instagram and the TikTok and the Facebook and all this stuff, I'm just going to create one link going forward where you can click this link and you can share that link with friends and with family members or anybody you think would be impacted by the podcast. Instead of having all the different links to all the different platforms, I am just going to be using this one link going forward. And on this link, there's also a place where you can join our mailing list as well as our texting list. And so that's something new that I am launching with this episode. There is a link within this link where you can click and it'll take you to our page where you can put in your email or put in your phone number. And that's something that I'm going to be personally emailing and texting everybody. It's not going to some third-party system, or we're not selling your data or anything like that. I just want to be able to better serve you as a listener and keep you in the loop on what's going on. And so that's something that I have seen other platforms and podcasts do that, and have thought, oh, that's a really good idea. And so as I'm trying to think of ways to better engage the audience and you as the listener, would love for you to click the link and then fill that out so you can join the list and get exclusive updates. And so I also am launching today with episode 26 through this link, a link where you can donate to the podcast. And this is something that I have been praying about and felt led to just create a platform or an avenue for people to financially support me and financially support the podcast. And it's something that I have been really carefully considering and haven't wanted to do really to this point. There was never a time where I've asked anybody to give any money, and there's still no need to give any money. Like, you don't have to feel pressured to give. And I want it to be something that I've had people reach out and say, hey, is there a way I can support what you're doing, Carlton? If there's been episodes that you've benefited from, if you want to contribute to the future success of the podcast and having it continue to reach people, then I wanted to have a way for people to do that. So you can go to this link and you can click on the donate option, and it'll take you to a page where you can donate, and all money that's donated to the podcast is going to go directly back into the podcast. I'm not planning to take any profit. I mean, to this point, 26 episodes in, I've made not even one penny from the podcast. I'm choosing not to run any ads. I'm choosing not to take on any sponsorships or promotions or anything like that. I just want it to be a place where people can hear the real honest stories of men that have come on to the podcast and will be continuing to come on. And so I was thinking, I'm putting in my own personal money to the podcast at this point, to get all the equipment, to create the branding and the marketing and all the editing that goes into the podcast now, I'm paying around $225 an episode just for the editing of the podcast and to hire the editors that I'm working with. And it's a lot of money. And I think it's something that God's called me to do that for this year, is to invest the money, not in a earthly sense that I'm going to be making more money from the podcast, but it's something that is going to be paying off, I believe, in heaven. And so, yeah, I have the ability to steward this time. And so if it takes me putting in more of my money to continue to see the stories of men be produced in a way that is beneficial to you as a listener and to a wide array of single men who might come across the podcast and, okay, this title or this thumbnail or this episode preview. If you haven't seen the episode previews recently, we've been really amping up the quality of those. And so, yeah, just trying to reach more men. And so I think that by putting in that money, it really enhances the quality of the product. And it's something that I wanted to be proud of once we finish the 52 total episodes, that there is all these episodes that people can come back to in the future even, and not just be something right now, but in the future, this could be something that helps single men. So I just want it to be as well done as it can be, and something that I'm proud of and that men who come on the podcast and tell their story are proud of as well. And so, yeah, that's my heart behind creating an option for people to donate if they would like to. There's no pressure to donate, but if you felt like you've benefited from the podcast and you want to support the future of the podcast, support the editing going forward, support us potentially getting new equipment, that's something that I just felt God wanting me to create the platform for, and the ability for people to do that. And so, yeah, that's my heart behind opening up that. And so if you're interested, if you would like to financially support, you can click this link and you can do that. I would really appreciate any donations that are received. And I actually film every episode of the podcast on my iPhone, which is kind of funny. Most people, when they come on the podcast, they're very surprised to think like, oh, wow, you just film on an iPhone. But yeah, I'm trying to upgrade that potentially in the future as well, so that the quality can continue to get better. And so that's my heart behind opening up that donation platform. And so there is going to be the link in the description, as well as here on the screen, if you want to click that to check out the link and then to donate. Moving on from the updates there, want to share stories of just feedback that I've gotten from listeners of the podcast at this point. And I'm going to read a few messages that I've received, whether it be through Instagram or through people personally texting me or sending me DMs. And so just going to read a few of these messages here. Hey, Carlton, just listen to this week's episode. And gosh, what a wake-up call as a follower of Jesus to be reminded of how others are watching what we do and how we respond to the brokenness of life. Such truth there. I hope the past few weeks have been restorative for you and the mission of the podcast. Thanks for all that you do to put this out. Hey, Carlton, just sending a quick note. I'm blown away by you and all these young men whose eyes, ears, hearts, and minds have been touched and opened by our gracious Lord. Thank you for providing an opportunity and platform where they can bear testimony of his goodness and faithfulness. God bless you. Hey, Carlton, just a question. I've been going through one of the worst phases in my life in regards to my relationship part of life. Been single for some time now. I always tend to jump into relationships without thinking through and screw up. Right now, I desperately wanted to be in a relationship, but trust me, I could feel the Lord intervene to put a halt in that, as nothing seems to work. The harder I try, I fail. I'm content with this now, but honestly, I'm struggling with lust a lot, and I hate it. The more I try to suppress it, the stronger it comes back. I honestly don't know what to do about it. Maybe you guys have some suggestions for this phase in life? Cheers. This is a great need. I am a single mom of 13 by way of a life-saving divorce. My ex was a pastor and an abuser. I was there for 26 years. There is an epidemic of abuse in the church and it must be addressed. I'm praying your work can help equip men in how to love their wives and children and willingly be held accountable by their fellow brothers in Christ. Hey, Carlton. Just wanted to let you know that I listened to the latest podcast. Really good stuff. God brought to mind one who could use this. Keep chasing after God's heart and reaching others for him. Hey, Carlton. I don't know if you remember me. Anyways, I listened to your podcast and just wanted to say I appreciated your testimony. After college, I struggled with identity and mental health issues. During those struggles, I found comfort in the Bible and ended up being saved by Jesus as well. Crazy how God works. Hey, Carlton, I've been listening to the podcast over the past week or so and have been loving it so far. Appreciate everything that you've done and opening the door for people to learn how to live in a godly way and use their time of singleness as a gift to better their relationship with Christ and find their future spouse who also has a passion for it. I just got out of a relationship about 4 months ago, and it's been really helpful listening to your podcast. I think it's brave of you and all the other men to expose sides of your life that we all struggle with. I'm 40 and I struggle daily with embarrassing sin in my life. So to hear you guys who are much younger share your stories is very inspiring. 2 more that I want to share. Hey, text your buddy Carlton, thank you, and that God used his podcast to change my life. Hi, Carlton. Currently, right now, I have been in the trenches, but when Joel said, John 10:10, the enemy only comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come so that you may have life and have it to the full, it struck me. I'm excited to read the Bible you recommended and learn something new. I just want to say I'm happy I came across your podcast. It's a blessing for me. It made me realize how far I am from God and I've been blinded by what's happening. Probably this is God's way to remind me that he is there. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I will treasure your podcast. So yeah, I just wanted to read some stories, and if you sent in or you've texted, you've messaged me any feedback on how the podcast has impacted you. It's really what's kept me going doing this. The first 10 weeks of doing the podcast, I, to be honest, wanted to quit every week, and a message would come through like this that just uplifted me and encouraged me to keep going. So yeah, we're halfway through, and yeah, excited to see what God continues to do, and I hope it and pray that it continues to bless you. And yeah, thanks for listening as I shared some of those, and hopefully you can see some of the tangible impact that the podcast is having on people's lives. Now I want to get into some Q&A. I got some questions through the podcast Instagram, and if you're not already following on Instagram, it's the Single Man Podcast on Instagram. You can click the link in the description, and that will take you to the Instagram as well. And so, yeah, I want to keep the episode going here, reading these. So, will you be keeping up the podcast after this year? Someone asked, and the answer to that, at least right now, is no. I've been praying about what to do with the podcast, and yeah, continuing to feel like God's leading me to finish out the 52 episodes that I originally committed to do, and to leave it at that. And so that's the plan for right now, unless he tells me differently. But yeah, that's how I'm operating, is 52 episodes, and that will be the end. What are the red flags we Christian men should be looking out for in a woman we find attractive? Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know, like, the word red flags, I think, just used a lot these days to just call out attributes of people. But personally, I think that there has to be kind of 3 areas that you evaluate someone on. First being your compatibility. Like, do you two get along? Do you have similar personalities? Are you doing the same type of purpose in life? Are you going the same direction? And I think also your physical attractiveness plays into it as well. And so that's something that I think the three of those combined, how you two are compatible, how you two are pursuing after your purpose in life, and then how you two physically find each other. I think those three things have to all kind of be coming into play. If you are kind of lacking in one of those three areas, I would say that that's something to evaluate. And if you don't see those three things, I would be hesitant to even ask somebody out personally. So that's something I would say, just like a red flag to look at. I think that many people start dating or like go on dates without evaluating that to begin with. And that's something that I personally like to do, is evaluate that from the beginning rather than start dating and then start evaluating after the fact. So I think the sooner you can look at red flags or, the qualities that someone has, the better off you'll be in the long run. Continuing to go through these, what's one piece of advice you would tell 21-year-old you about dating that you now know? So for those that don't know, I'm 29 now. When I was 21, I guess I was in college then. And I really wasn't super focused on dating, to be honest, in college. But I think I just was caught up in what everyone else was doing around me at that time. And I didn't think anything about these three things I just outlined, like what's the person's purpose in life? What is our compatibility in terms of personality, and do we get along? And then the last thing, am I physically attracted to them? And so I think that would be what I would say back when I was 21, looking at those three things. Do I see those three things being in alignment? And if not, then not pursuing or not talking to women that I didn't see that with in terms of a dating relationship. Next question, should women try to meet men by going on dating apps or in-person meetups? In general, personally, I prefer in-person meetups. I'm actually not on dating apps. I haven't been on dating apps since 2021, since before I was a Christian. And I actually have felt led since becoming a Christian not to get back on dating apps. Something I feel like God's told me is that I'm not going to meet my wife on a dating app. And I think that is something that there's a sense of control that comes from being on a dating app. And I think that God is a big God. He's a powerful God. He can bring people together in his timing, however he best sees fit. And so I just would say, if you're personally on dating apps or you're thinking about getting on dating apps, to just make sure that that's something that you feel like God is telling you to do, and not just, okay, I'm not meeting anybody, so let me get on the dating apps, and doing it out of your own power, and just make sure that's something that God's telling you to do. So that's what I would say on that one. Last question, how do you stay content while single? Content with your situation, making sure you don't compare to others' lives, relationships. I think I've learned over this last year, I took a year off of dating in 2023, or part of 2023, and then I took off, it kind of was part of 2022 into part of 2023, where I took a year off of dating. And I really learned, I feel like, a lot about being content in singleness through that time. So I'd say if it's something that you have ever done something like that, where you've intentionally taken time off from dating, where you're not even considering it, I would really recommend that. And whether it be a month or 6 months or a year, whatever you feel like you should do. Personally, I did a year, which seemed like a really long time, but looking back, I'm grateful that I took it off. And so now, being 3 years since I was last in a relationship with somebody, I feel like I've learned to be content in singleness in two ways. One, I feel like I've just become more comfortable in who I am personally, and what I bring to the table as a man, and in my relationship with Jesus. I've become a lot stronger in my relationship with him, and knowing that he is who satisfies me and sustains me, and it's not something that I need to have a relationship to be content and satisfied in life. I'd be lying if I had said that I didn't desire to be in a relationship again one day. And I think there is a little bit of, to be honest, some fear that I have around it too, where I previously had been hurt in relationships, and it's something that you have to kind of be vulnerable to put yourself back out there, being in a relationship. And so I wouldn't say I've become comfortable being single, but I would say I've just learned to trust God and his timing in being single, and knowing that specifically like this podcast, he's called me to do that for this year. And so I want to continue to do that well. And I'm open to dating. I'm open to, going on dates, and, I want to meet my future wife, and I believe I will do that, in God's timing. But until that comes, just being aware of what God's called me to do in the season and doing that to the best of my ability, and not focusing on when's she going to come, or, okay, I'm getting impatient, God, like what's going on? Come on. But just continuing to run my race and stay focused on that, and doing that well. So hopefully that encourages, everyone listening, and thank you everybody for asking questions. We'll now move on to the next series. So I'm excited to announce that starting next week with episode 27 through episode 30. So we're going to have episode 27, 28, 29, 30, 4 episodes of women coming on the podcast. And I'm really excited for this series. I have had a lot of feedback from women who listen to the podcast, and men wanting to hear women's perspectives. And I've got 4 amazing women lined up who are going to be coming on the podcast and sharing their story of how they came to know Jesus, as well as how they have approached dating and relationships from a Christian single woman perspective. And also they're going to be speaking about specifically encouragement to men. And so if you're a single man listening, I think you're going to really benefit from these next 4 episodes. And I have just high expectations for them. And the women I'm bringing on, I've prayed about who to have on, and I feel really strongly that these 4 women are going to bring a lot of value and wisdom, and God's going to use their stories and their advice to help both single men as well as single women who have been listening to the podcast. And so really excited for this next series. I hope that you'll continue to come back and listen to these next 4 episodes, and let me know what you think as you're listening. If you enjoy change up from just having men come on the podcast. And I'm excited to see what the reaction is from you as the listeners to these next 4 episodes. We are going to start wrapping up this episode here. So just want to remind everybody and encourage you to click the link here in the description of this episode. Like I said at the beginning, this is the link going forward I'm going to be using for all episodes. Instead of having like 20 different links to all the different platforms, it'll just be this one link here. And so if there's anything, if you're not already subscribed to the podcast on YouTube, if you're not following on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, if you haven't left a rating yet, you can click this link, and that will take you to the different platforms to do that. If you're not following on Instagram or TikTok, you can do that as well from this link. If you would like to donate, if you'd like to join the mailing list or the texting list, you can do that as well, all from this link. And so just want to encourage you to do that, and also to continue to just be praying for me, and continuing to pray for the future of the podcast. Halfway in now, which is amazing, and just super grateful to have made it to this point. And just thinking back when it was just a vision I had and where it's at now, it just has been crazy to see how God's carried me through each individual week, literally like day at a time at times, where I'm just like, I can't keep doing this. And he's continued to sustain me and see me through it. And so, I'd be lying if there hasn't been a lot of temptation. I feel like the enemy has really come after me in different ways doing this podcast, and temptation to, okay, you're single, like you're going to be single forever, Carlton, like you should be going on dates, like maybe you should be asking people out more, and just trying to stay confident and content in what God's told me to do has been hard and been a challenge while doing this. And so, continuing to keep me in your prayers, I would really appreciate that here as we head into the second half of the podcast. And excited to jump into this stories starting next week with the women that I've had on the podcast and that are going to be coming on. And I'm really expectant for these conversations. Really, the second half of the podcast, I really want the theme to just be reaching single men who don't know Jesus. And I think that, was my original heart and vision behind the podcast. And I want to just amplify that message here in the second half of the podcast, and know that this is going to be a resource that will be available for years to come, and that I'm grateful for you being a part of it. You have more impact than you think just being a listener of the podcast. The more that people engage with it, the more that the platforms push it out to new single men who might come across it, and it might encourage them, it might change their life, as you heard from some of the stories and the feedback I've gotten that I read earlier in the episode. And so, I am just sincerely grateful for everybody that's listening. For you personally that's listening now, can't thank you enough for all your support and just coming back week after week. And even if you never have sent me a message, you've never subscribed to anything, you never followed, you've never followed on Instagram, or you'll never join the Instagram community, you'll never join the texting list or the email list, or you'll never donate. To be honest, that's probably what I would be doing if I was a single man listening to this podcast, or listening to most podcasts before I was a Christian. I wouldn't ever engage with any podcasts at all, and so, or really any platforms at all, any mediums at all. So I'd just be listening and absorbing. And if that's you, if you're a single man listening to this episode now and you're not sure what you think about faith, you're not sure what you think about Jesus, the name somehow caught your eye, or somebody sent you this episode or sent you a episode and you've been listening, just keep coming back. That's all I would say. And there's no pressure to do anything. Just keep listening, and I pray that God will use the stories of men to just touch your heart, and the podcast can just be a vehicle to do that. And so nothing that I do or say can save anybody, nothing that the podcast can do or say or says can save anybody, but only Jesus, only the Holy Spirit can save people, and I believe he can use this as a resource to do that. And so that's where things are at right now with the podcast and making it to the midway point. Grateful to be here, and thank you again so much for listening to this week's episode. I hope you have a great rest of your Friday, and I will see you next week as we kick off the series with women. I am super excited for this episode 27 that's coming out next Friday, and so I'm so excited for you to hear it next Friday as well. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Single Man Podcast. If someone you know would benefit from this week's episode, I'd love for you to text them the link and invite them to listen. You never know how a simple invitation could change someone's life. We'll be back next Friday at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, with a new episode. Until then, check out the video version of the podcast on YouTube, and you can engage with us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.